They say family should be the ones who know you're worth the most. But what happens when they see only what you don't have? I'm Jessica, a single mom, an accountant, and for years, the quiet one at every family gathering. Not glamorous, not rich, just surviving. But life has a way of teaching you that the ones they laugh at today may just be the ones they envy tomorrow. Today, I want to share a story about how kindness, patience, and a little unexpected courage turned my world upside down. So pull up a chair. Let me take you back to the beginning. To a chilly evening, a cluttered desk, and a boy's voice calling out, "Mom, are you done yet?" That night, everything started to change. My tiny home office wasn't much. Just a battered desk, a second-hand chair, and a heater that rattled whenever it kicked on. But it was ours. As I tapped out numbers on my old calculator, my son, Max, peeked his head around the door. His sandy hair was a mess from running outside, and his green eyes, so much like his grandfather's, sparkled with impatience. "Almost done, buddy," I said with a tired smile. Life wasn't glamorous. My days were a blur of client statements, last-minute grocery runs, second-hand soccer cleats, and homemade science fair volcanoes that didn't always erupt the right way. I wasn't attending charity galas. I was clipping coupons at the kitchen table, praying the old car would make it another month. But Max never saw lack. He only saw a mother who showed up. Every soccer game, every parent-teacher meeting, every late-night homework crisis with a bowl of microwaved popcorn and a hug. And that was enough for him. In a world that celebrated the loud, the flashy, and the polished, I was learning that quiet perseverance was its own kind of rebellion. Sometimes being enough has nothing to do with what you own, and everything to do with how you love. That night, as I closed Max's math book and tucked him into bed with his favorite threadbare dinosaur blanket, I had no idea we were about to walk straight into a world that measured worth in a very different way. A world where family dinners weren't about love, but about appearances. And it all started with one phone call. The phone buzzed on my desk, breaking the quiet hum of the heater. I didn't even have to check the screen. It was my mother. With her, calls were never casual. They were summons. I picked up, balancing the phone between my ear and shoulder while gathering Max's homework. "Jessica," she said briskly, not wasting a second. "You're coming to Amanda's engagement dinner tomorrow, aren't you?" Notice, it wasn't a question. It was an expectation. "I'll be there," I answered, keeping my voice steady. "Max too." Was I? "Fine," she clipped. "Just make sure he behaves. This is an important night." I swallowed hard, the old ache blooming in my chest. Everything always was about Amanda. "What does her fiancé do?" I asked casually, trying to keep the conversation light. My mother's voice swelled with pride. "Daniel Carter. Investment banking. Old family money. Harvard graduate. Absolutely perfect for her." I nodded silently, even though she couldn't see me. Perfect. In her world, perfect meant polished shoes, effortless smiles, and the kind of resume you could frame in gold. And me? I was the daughter who wore flats, carried coupons, and measured success by whether or not Max smiled at the end of the day. After the call ended, I sat there for a moment, staring at the fading sunlight outside my tiny window. Max was in the next room, probably doodling spaceships in the margins of his notebook again, humming to himself without a care in the world. I pressed a hand against my chest, willing the heaviness away. He didn't notice the sideways glances, the half-hearted greetings, or if he did, he never let it dim his light, and neither would I. Sometimes the brightest hearts shine the hardest when no one's clapping for them. The next evening, Max and I stood at the doorstep of Vivian's grand house, the one that smelled of designer candles but somehow always felt a few degrees colder than outside. I smoothed Max's jacket and gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Ready, kiddo?" He nodded, a quiet, brave little nod I had seen so many times before. Together, we stepped into the house that valued appearances more than people, not knowing that soon, appearances were about to shatter. The heavy door swung open, and there she stood. Vivian, my mother. Impeccably dressed in a cream suit, her smile tight and practiced. "Jessica, Max," she said, with all the warmth of a bank teller announcing overdraft fees. "You're late." I glanced at my watch. We were right on time. "Good to see you too, Mom," I said softly, nudging Max ahead. The air inside smelled like roasted duck, expensive perfume, and something colder, the scent of expectation. As we moved past the gleaming marble floors and towering flower arrangements, I could hear the laughter before we even reached the living room. Amanda's laughter. A pitch, perfectly rehearsed. A laugh meant to be heard and envied. In the middle of the room, perched on a pristine cream sofa, was Amanda herself, glowing in a designer dress, swirling wine in her hand like a scene out of a lifestyle magazine. Beside her stood a man, tall, confident, polished, the embodiment of everything my family worshipped. Amanda rose, flashing a bright smile as if cameras were snapping from every angle. "Jess, so glad you could make it," she chimed, voice syrupy sweet. "And Max," she added, almost as an afterthought. Then she turned to the man beside her. "This is Daniel Carter, my fiancé." Daniel extended his hand toward me. Not with the practiced aloofness I expected, but with genuine warmth. "It's nice to finally meet you, Jessica," he said, his voice steady and kind. I shook his hand, feeling the surprising steadiness of it. Not a businessman's stiff grip, but something real. Then he knelt slightly to Max's level, offering a big grin. "Hey buddy, what grade are you in?" Max shuffled shyly, glancing up at me before mumbling. "Fifth." Daniel's eyes lit up. "Fifth grade. My favorite year. That's when I built a volcano for the science fair. It exploded all over the gym." Max's face broke into a grin, and for the first time that night, the heaviness lifted. They laughed together. A real laugh, not the polished kind echoing around the room. In a house where smiles often masked judgment, Daniel's laughter with my son stood out like a candle in a dark hall. Sometimes the richest people aren't the ones with the biggest bank accounts, but the ones who can kneel, look you in the eye, and make you feel seen. Just as I was savoring that rare warmth, Amanda's voice sliced through the air again. "Jess, you're not wearing that to the wedding, are you?" Her tone was playful on the surface, and cutting underneath. "You're not a bridesmaid, obviously," she added, flashing a sharp smile that dared me to react. Vivian chimed in smoothly from the corner, her words wrapped in silk and thorns. "We decided not to overwhelm you, dear. You have enough to handle. Being a single mother and all." My nails dug lightly into my palm, but I only nodded. That quiet, practiced nod I had learned over years of standing still in rooms like these. Only Daniel looked uneasy. His glance flickered toward me, full of something I rarely received in this house. Apology. Recognition. I gave him the smallest, most tired smile I could manage. Little did I know, that polite stranger would soon change everything. Because not all battles are fought with shouting. Some are won in silence, in kindness, and in knowing exactly when and how to turn the tables. In the days leading up to Amanda's wedding, my life turned into a quiet flurry of spreadsheets, guest lists, and endless corrections. Invitations with misspelled names, seating charts missing key relatives, vendors calling last minute, panicking about forgotten deposits. I wasn't part of the wedding party, but somehow I became part of the cleanup crew. Every time a mistake popped up, and there were plenty, Amanda would toss it casually toward me, her voice syrupy sweet. "Jess, you're so good with the boring stuff. Can you just handle it?" I handled it, quietly, efficiently, without thanks. Small warm sigh. One evening, as I sat cross-legged on the carpet, carefully cross-checking RSVP lists with seating charts, I heard footsteps behind me. It was Daniel. Sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, a cup of coffee in hand. "Helping again?" he asked, with a half-smile that didn't feel mocking. I chuckled, not looking up. Just fixing the spelling of Amanda's close friends. Half of them are ex-boyfriends she forgot she invited. Daniel laughed. A real laugh. A low, genuine sound that filled the room in a way no designer candle ever could. He sat down beside me without asking, glancing over the lists. "You're really saving this wedding," he said quietly. I paused, fingers still on the paper. "Not the first time I've saved something that didn't really belong to me," I murmured, and immediately wished I hadn't said it out loud. But Daniel didn't laugh. He didn't look away. He just studied me for a long moment, the kind of look that made you feel like maybe someone finally saw you. "You know," he said slowly, "I keep feeling like I've met you before." His words caught me off guard. I stared at him, a strange flicker of recognition tugging at the edges of my memory too. Something buried deep from another life. In that polished, gleaming house. A place obsessed with appearances. Somehow, in the middle of all the little jabs and paper cuts, something real was starting to form. Sometimes the smallest kindnesses. A shared coffee, a steady glance, a seat on the floor beside you, matter more than grand gestures. And soon, those tiny cracks in the perfect picture Amanda had painted would become impossible to ignore. The reception hall sparkled under 1,000 twinkling lights. Crystal glasses chimed, and polished shoes shuffled across glossy floors. It looked like a dream, the kind Amanda had been chasing her whole life. But under the glamour, something felt brittle. The laughter was just a little too loud. The smiles were stretched a little too tight. I stood quietly at the edge of it all, Max sitting beside me at the long white draped table, swinging his legs nervously. I smoothed my simple blue dress and straightened my posture, reminding myself I didn't need to outshine anyone. I just needed to show up. For my son. Gentle reflective pause. As the music faded, Amanda glided to the center of the room, microphone in hand, glowing like a queen crowned in diamonds. The room hushed expectantly. She flashed a dazzling smile, one that barely reached her eyes, and began her speech. "First," she said, voice dripping with charm, "I want to thank my maid of honor, my dear sister Jessica." Polite clapping rippled through the crowd. I offered a small, quiet nod, my hands folded neatly in my lap. Then, Amanda's tone shifted, just slightly. Sweet on the surface, sharp underneath. "Jessica is a single mom. Isn't that so brave?" A dramatic pause. Nervous chuckles floated across the room. "Brave," Amanda repeated. "To live life without ever being truly loved." The laughter grew, awkward, forced. Max's small hand slid into mine under the table. His fingers were trembling. "Anyone looking to adopt?" Amanda added with a smirk, tossing the punchline into the air like confetti. For a heartbeat, the room froze. Then the laughter erupted, louder, messier. "Not from everyone, but enough." I sat still, the way you do when a wasp lands on your arm, too stunned to move. Vivian rose from her seat, smiling that razor-thin smile. "Our Jessica has always been the quiet one," she said sweetly. "Reliable. A little plain, perhaps. But even second-hand goods can find value, especially with a built-in child." This time the laughter roared. My face burned. My lungs struggled for air. But I squeezed Max's hand tighter. Not for me. For him. I wouldn't let them see me break. Sometimes, true dignity isn't found in grand speeches or glittering ballrooms. It's found in holding your head high when everything inside you is breaking. Quiet sigh. I slowly rose from my chair, intending to slip out quietly, to gather my son and leave this hollow, sparkling place behind. But before I could move, another chair scraped sharply against the floor. Daniel. His face was red with fury. His fists clenched at his sides. The room fell into a stunned silence as he strode to the center, reached for the microphone in Amanda's hand, and said calmly but heavily, "Excuse me. I need to say something." Daniel stood at the center of the room, the microphone in his hand trembling slightly. But his voice, when he spoke, was clear and steady. "Tonight," he began, "was supposed to be the most important day of my life." Amanda let out a nervous laugh, waving her hand. "Oh, Daniel, come on." He raised a hand to silence her. The room froze. "It turns out," he said, looking around at the glittering faces, "the most important part of today wasn't the ceremony, or the flowers, or even the vows." His gaze found mine across the crowded room, a look so full of something raw, something real, that my heart stopped. "It was seeing the truth," Daniel continued, "standing in front of me all along." Soft gasps rippled through the crowd like a breeze catching dry leaves. "Jessica and I," he said, voice thickening slightly. "We didn't meet for the first time a few months ago. We met years ago, when my sister Caroline was fighting leukemia." Stunned silence. I gripped Max's small hand tighter under the table. "Jessica was a volunteer at the hospital," Daniel said, his voice softening. "She read to Caroline. She sang with her. She made her laugh, even on the worst days when the pain was too much." I blinked hard, the memory of Caroline's frail body, her brave smile flooding back. Daniel turned to the guests, to Amanda, to Vivian. "And not once," he said, voice sharpening, "did Jessica ask for recognition. She just showed up, with her heart open. She was there, when so many others weren't." His gaze swept the room. "And tonight, I watched the way you all treated her. Jokes, the cruelty dressed up as humor. And I realized, I want no part of it." A ripple of shocked whispers surged around the room. Amanda's face paled. Vivian's lips pressed into a thin, angry line. "I'm calling off the wedding," Daniel said simply. Someone in the back dropped a champagne glass. Vivian shot to her feet. "You don't know what you're saying," she hissed. "We spent." "I'll pay for everything," Daniel cut her off calmly. "Every flower, every plate of food, every ridiculous centerpiece. Send the bill to my office." And then, in a move so quiet, so powerful, Daniel walked across the glittering hall. He knelt beside Max, looked him in the eye, and said, "Thank you for being the light you are." Max blinked in surprise, clutching tighter to my hand. Then Daniel stood before me, his hand outstretched. No flashy promises, no grand declarations, just a simple invitation. "Come with me." And in that moment, I realized something. Sometimes the people who truly see you, the ones who recognize your quiet strength, are worth leaving everything behind for. Without a word, Max and I stood. I slipped my hand into Daniel's, and together, we walked out of that shimmering hall of broken glass smiles and hollow laughter. Behind us, Amanda screamed. Vivian shouted. Cameras flashed. But we didn't look back. Outside, the night was cool and dark and beautifully real. And somewhere deep in my chest, hope sparked, tiny but unshakable. The air outside was cool, crisp and free. As we stepped away from the glittering chaos behind us, I felt something lift. A weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years. Daniel's hand held mine steady. Max skipped lightly between us, as if sensing somehow that the hardest part was over. We didn't rush. We simply walked, three figures under the wide-open night sky, leaving behind a world that measured worth in dollars and polished smiles. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't walking away because I was forced to. I was walking away because I chose to. We ended up at a small restaurant tucked away by the coast. A place with creaky wooden floors, handwritten menus, and fairy lights strung along the terrace. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. We sat outside, the soft sound of the waves below us, a warm light from the overhead lanterns bathing us in a gentle glow. For a while we didn't speak. Max drew quiet pictures on the back of a napkin. A lighthouse, a smiling sun, little stars scattered across the sky. Daniel sat across from me, watching Max with a kind of tender protectiveness that made my heart ache, the kind of gaze I'd once seen long ago in my father's eyes. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "I'm sorry," he said, voice rough with sincerity, "for what happened, for what they said, for everything you shouldn't have had to endure." I shook my head gently. "You don't have to apologize for their choices," I said. "You stood up when it mattered. That says everything. True courage isn't just about fighting battles. Sometimes it's about knowing when to walk away, with your dignity intact, your heart whole, and your head held high." That night, as Max leaned sleepily against my shoulder, and Daniel quietly paid the bill without fanfare, I realized something. Sometimes the life you deserve, the peace, the love, the belonging, isn't something you fight for inside broken rooms. It's something you build, step by quiet step, inside them. The next morning was quiet, the kind of morning where even the air feels softer. Daniel called early, his voice low but steady. "Would you and Max come with me somewhere?" I didn't even hesitate. "Some journeys you just know you're meant to take." We met outside a small cemetery tucked away from the busy streets, a place filled with sunlight filtering through old oak trees, and the soft crunch of leaves underfoot. Max clutched my hand tightly, a small painted rock in his pocket, a rock he had made the night before, bright yellow with a smiling sun and a trail of tiny stars across it. "For her," he had whispered, carefully hiding it from view like a precious secret. Daniel led the way, his steps slow and sure, until we reached a small, simple gravestone. "Caroline Carter, sister, daughter, a light never forgotten." Daniel knelt first, placing a small bouquet of fresh lilies against the stone. His hand lingered there, his shoulders still for a long, aching moment. Then he stepped back, giving Max space. My son, with all the quiet courage of someone much older than his 10 years, pulled out his painted stone, knelt carefully, and placed it right beside the flowers. "Thank you for being nice to me," he whispered, his voice barely louder than the breeze. I felt my throat tighten, my eyes sting. Daniel's hand found mine, a small, silent comfort. We stood there for a long time, three people stitched together by invisible threads of kindness, memory, and hope. Healing doesn't always come in loud, dramatic moments. Sometimes it comes quietly, kneeling beside a grave, whispering thank you, and choosing to carry love forward instead of pain. As we walked back toward the car, sunlight danced through the trees, and I realized this wasn't just about closing old chapters. It was about opening new ones. 1 year later, the seasons had changed, and so had we. I stood outside a modest brick building in the heart of town, a fresh wooden sign swinging gently above the door. Monroe Financial Solutions. Name, my work, my future. I ran my fingers lightly across the carved letters, feeling a sense of pride that had nothing to do with wealth, and everything to do with perseverance. Inside, the office was small but welcoming. A cozy gray sofa, bookshelves filled with ledgers and green plants, and a corkboard above my desk peppered with Max's drawings. There were no marble floors, no polished chandeliers, just warmth, just honesty. Business grew slowly but surely. First, neighbors from the community, small shop owners, retirees, young couples needing help setting up their first savings plans. Word spread, not because of flashy ads or connections, but because people knew they could trust me. Meanwhile, Max flourished too. At 11, he had shot up like a beanpole, all elbows and grins. He'd just been named captain of his soccer team, not because he was the loudest, but because he was the one who stayed behind after practice, encouraging the kid who always missed the goal. I saw so much of my father in him, and so much of the dreams I once thought I had to bury. Daniel, too, was still here, steady, patient, never rushing me. He worked long hours, but he never missed a dinner, a soccer game, or a late-night homework panic. He didn't save me, He stood beside me. And that made all the difference. New beginnings don't require fireworks or dramatic declarations. Sometimes they come quietly, in the steady click of an adding machine, the messy sketches of a boy on a corkboard, and the steady hand that reaches for yours at the end of a long day. Life didn't become perfect. Became real. Became ours. And soon, under a sky full of snow and promises, life would offer one more unexpected gift. Christmas Eve arrived like a quiet miracle. Outside our little house, snow drifted gently from the sky, frosting the rooftops and softening the edges of the world. Inside, the living room glowed with twinkling lights. Max was curled up on the couch, deep asleep under a thick blanket, a half-eaten gingerbread cookie still on his plate. I sat by the fire, a mug of cocoa warming my hands, feeling the kind of peace that doesn't shout, hums. Daniel sat quietly beside me, his arm brushing lightly against mine, the comfort of his presence saying more than words ever could. For the first time in years, there was no noise, no judgment, no proving, just belonging. Daniel shifted slightly, reaching into the pocket of his coat. "I've been waiting for the right moment," he said, his voice low. I turned toward him, heart suddenly pounding, as he slowly opened a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate emerald ring, vintage, soft in its sparkle, beautiful in a way that spoke of history, of meaning. "It was Caroline's," Daniel said gently. "Before she passed, she told me, when you find someone who reminds you what it feels like to truly love, give her this." My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes, spilling over before I could even blink them back. He took my hand carefully, holding it like something precious. "Jessica," he whispered, "will you marry me?" I looked at the sleeping boy on the couch, the man beside me whose strength wasn't in loud promises but in everyday faithfulness, and the soft, falling snow outside. And I realized, we were already a family. This, all of it, had been real long before the ring. I nodded through my tears, my voice thick with joy. "Yes," I whispered. 1,000 times yes. Daniel slipped the ring onto my finger, and the world seemed to sigh in relief around us, as if even the snowflakes paused to listen. True family isn't built from perfection or grand gestures. It's built quietly over time, in 1,000 small choices to show up, to believe. That Christmas Eve, under a roof held up by love and laughter, I understood something I had spent a lifetime chasing. You don't have to fight to be enough for the right people. You already are. Thank you so much for listening to Jessica's story today. If there's one lesson to take away, it's this. Kindness, even when it's unseen or unappreciated, is never wasted. True strength isn't about standing in the spotlight. It's about standing tall, even when no one is clapping for you. I would love to hear from you. What part of Jessica's journey resonated with you the most? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might inspire someone else who needs it today. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so you never miss the next chapter we'll share together. Until then, stay kind, stay strong, and remember, sometimes the quietest victories are the ones that matter most.